Hello, as you will see, we are just about to get your webinar underway so that we have a smooth transition. Could you just let me know in the chat if you can see a screen together with hearing my voice? Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this Virtuoso webinar, Test Automation for the Insurance Industry. Get future-proofed now. My name is Ryan Thornton, and as a VP of Marketing and coming from product marketing background, it is incumbent upon me an absolute pleasure and a contractual obligation to lead you through the next 30 minutes of webinar. I will be amply aided and abetted by my partner in test, Virtuoso's very own VP of Solutions Engineering, Mr. James Bent. How are you, James?
Very well, thank you very much, Ryan. My very grandiose title, but really I am here today to actually show you the platform, keeping it simple and keeping it relevant to the topic we have today, which is insurance.
A grandiose title for a rather grandiose man with delusions of grandeur. You will see that by the end of it. I'm sure that you will not see it in the demo section of the webinar. Before anybody raises their hand and asks that age-old question, yes, this webinar is being recorded. It will pick up all my mistakes that I've just made, like that one then, and will be winging its way after you tomorrow through the email. We will be having a question and answer session at the end of this webinar, so please do put your questions in the Q&A panel, and we will see what we can do about asking them. And what are we talking about today? Well, we're going to look at the insurance industry specifically, the current pressures, process changes, new technology, and then we'll get into the juicy bit, the bit that's actually the most exciting, where James will take you through a demonstration of the platform. And as I said moments ago, there will be a Q&A session, so please do feel free to ask questions in that Q&A panel. So Virtuoso, an introduction to us. We're in the habit of getting shit done faster. We deliver the power of code with the ease of codeless. We believe that our scripted approach, our natural language programming, means that the abstraction from the code level is kept to a minimum, giving you most of the versatility that you would get with your traditional coded approaches, while also giving you the ease of use and speed of codeless. We don't believe that you lose any of the power through the way in which we author, but you will see that much more when we get onto the good stuff, which is the demo, obviously. So we've come from an uncertain past to an uncertain future. The pandemic saw fewer claims. Insurers have a little bit of cash on the hip in lots of different parts of insurance. Obviously, there's not the same pressures on everyone. I'm not going to claim that. Normal conditions will return soon, and in fact, inflation is already pushing up the cost of claims. So we believe now is the time to invest in test automation in ways that will give prolonged return on investment. Testing and QA, large test suites that are almost impossible to maintain, lots of different areas for you to automate, from policy to claims, etc., etc. A lot of the time we've seen a return to manual, just because that maintenance burden is so heavy. The tests all failed, so we turned them off and returned to manual. Time spent fixing flaky tests and not finding bugs, back to first principles, is what we're going to offer here. And that is that testers can increase the quality of their applications and find bugs rather than spending their time meddling with flaky tests. There's, of course, an unknown level of redundancy. These tests are often made over probably about just over a decade now in many cases, maybe even more. And it's been made by several individual testers, built up, and you don't always know exactly what they're doing, but you want all those lights to turn green. And the speed of authoring just simply cannot deliver meaningful in sprint automation. Of course, you can always have something in sprint, but is it meaningful? So we'll quickly solve these problems, and you will have your ROI and have a test automation strategy that is fit for an, as ever, unpredictable future. Which I think brings me succinctly on to my colleague, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Bent.
Thank you very much, Ryan. So look, we're going to get right into the platform. We're going to be showing you a demo of the platform, very much in context of how we're learning our customers who work in the insurance industry are using the platform, including things like the functional UI testing of multiple browser-based apps. So we know in insurance there are multiple portals, whether it's across underwriters, policyholders, brokers, the market, or in customers. Different business systems for processing policies, addressing risk, but then also things like looking at notifications going out through email, for example. How we can deal with integration testing. So where these applications are connected with integrations and there are data flows going between them, how you can test that with Virtuoso. But also insurance is underpinned, of course, by documentation, PDFs, outputs to be able to validate policies, for example. So we'll show how within the journeys of functional UI integration, you can also test on documentation, maybe asserting on policy IDs on PDFs, for example. And look, we've got a lot of text down there, but we're going to be showing you our live authoring, executing from within your plans or CI/CD tools, how you can debug with our root cause analysis, but then also how you use self-healing, machine learning to be able to maintain tests without any or much at all manual intervention, and then driving tests with test data and parallel testing. So I think to that point, Ryan, if we click onto the next slide, we should have time for the demo. So let's get into that. So if I steal the screen from you, Ryan, let me jump across. So let's get into Virtuoso. So this is Virtuoso. We are ourselves a browser-based application hosted in the cloud. We can still test on private networks. We are SOC 2 compliant, and we fully understand in the insurance industry in particular, where things like information security is imperative, then we fully work with that with our customers, and we're a very robust solution. That said, the actual solution itself. So again, functional UI integration, end-to-end testing of browser-based applications using natural language. So good example, or the simplest of examples, if I see that there is an accept tool on the screen, I can click on accept tool. I can just simply write that as a test step. That's as much as I need to do. I didn't have to set up objects or keywords beforehand to be able to run that. I literally just write that in. We'll see in a minute, though, how you can also click and interact with the screen. So capture what you did through live authoring, but we'll do that in just a moment. What I want to do first is just sort of talk about, well, what are we actually testing here and how does that align to particularly insurance? So this is, talking from, we're looking at an insurance comparison site to be able to go and get a simple one here, boiler cover for insurance. So this represents a sort of front-end customer-facing portal where you can go through, fill in necessary forms to be able to get a quotation. Doing this, we've got some simple interactions through the natural language, like clicking on buttons, or it could be writing data into a particular field on screen. But then, even as we see here, there's a very strong emphasis on both data, but also validating the outputs of testing. Where for this instance, you can see we're not writing an actual postcode in our step, we've got a variable. In this case, that is driven by test data. So I can set up test data sets. So I could have different customer details, addresses, whatever sort of insurance they want to apply for. And I could set that up in a parameterized data table, which I can upload via CSV. So I could predefine my data. But actually you could drive that data as well from, could be API calls. So with Virtuoso, you can bring in and make an API call in your tests. You could do that at the start of your test, do a get call to get your insurance details based on what's existing in a system on a given day. So look for a customer with a policy, store that via the API call, and then start using that in your test. We can integrate with databases to get the same, whether it's validating data or getting data. Basically, what we're finding, particularly in insurance testing, is it's not just about the functions. It's about being able to data derive from different aspects, but also removing that issue of data management. So today, if you've got different environments which are being updated on a daily basis, or data is being used and transitioned to different statuses, this means that you don't have to worry about figuring out what data there is, creating a data table, or pre-loading data. You could do it again by, let's say, an integration to get the data to drive your tests with. So a very strong ability to manage data. But then on the other side, doing things like where we're generating dynamic data. So for example, here we have a price for an insurance product. It could be when you're generating a policy and they have a policy ID. I can store that into a variable. So now I've got that data I'm generating in test. I can store that. I could then assert on it. So perform all manner of assertions based on testing output. So assert that a policy status equals active, or assert that a policy ID is, a certain pattern, maybe 10 characters. But then I could also take that insurance quote, which has been stored, the price. I could pass that into an API call. And so now what I could do is test if there's an integration in place between a portal and another platform, that data is being integrated by making, in this case, a call, passing in the value through the API call, and then assert on the response. I might say, success response of 200, for example, to check the data has been integrated. But then further to that, in this test, while you may choose to keep your tests, granular and just looking at a single application, you can see here we're actually going across multiple different applications. In this case, we're going from a front-end portal to get the insurance quote. We're then jumping, in this case, into Salesforce. And then we're logging into Salesforce to then create an opportunity, again, using that insurance quote value and the customer details generated, which was stored. We're then creating an opportunity off the back of that data. So whether you do this in one journey, one test, or whether you run what we call a flow, where you could have a sequential flow of tests which persist data across them, we're now talking about being able to test across applications, whether that's in different UIs, whether it's using integrations, recognizing that particularly with insurance, again, you've got a variety of portals, risk analysis platforms, but even then logging into documentation platforms. So for example, here we're going into Salesforce where we are generating the opportunity, but then at the end of our test, we're actually going then to download a PDF document. So where we go on screen, there might be a download link. So we can click on that link, and bear in mind here, you can see we've actually got multiples of that same button. So what we've done here is say, look for the label, home insurance quote template, and then click on the PDF version underneath that. So we're providing context, even though we're just using the natural language without any further hints or selectors, say. But then by clicking that, we can then download, you'll see we've downloaded the PDF. We can then show that on screen. So we can load up the PDF. And now we could assert on that. For example, it could be check that the price for the policy that we stored in our test using the store command up here is now shown on our PDF. Check the policy ID is shown. Check the customer, so the person being insured is shown. Basically validate the documentation is showing the details that were displayed based on what was driven through the test. Now, this tends to be a very, very common workflow through our insurance customers to test across a variety of portals with integrations and then looking at documentation. The great thing here is that you can see it's all in natural language, so you can really start to both read it, but then also we've got screenshots being captured for every before and after interaction. We're getting testing evidence automatically captured. But really to give you a flavor of what the experience is like when you are authoring with Virtuoso, we do have what we call live authoring. So where the application has been released, bearing in mind you can write your natural language steps prior to release, because you could be looking at a wireframe or design. We have customers doing this. Where the application is released, you get a live browser window and you can start building your test. So for instance, I could say, click on accept all. And by doing that, Virtuoso will go and look for the accept all, click on it, the step goes green, we know that it's working. I can validate that on the basis we've captured the screenshots. So now immediately I know that my test is working and I have the control here to build sort of at my pace, putting together the steps, whether I'm using different interactions. So let's go mouse over insurance. Let's open the insurance. There we go. Click on car insurance, which goes and clicks on the car insurance link. But then if I want to say, well, I don't want to write every step, I want to click on the screen, then I could then hover over login, right click, click on that step. It writes the step for me. I could be doing things like storing data. So I could store the how you use your data. So let's say data blurb. I could store that into, we can see here a variable when that step runs. There we go. I could assert on that to say assert that data blurb contains, let's say, privacy policy. So I can be sort of real time capturing, but also writing my assertions in here. But then even if I go as far as saying, well, what if I write a test step that doesn't work? So I could say, write James B at virtuoso.qa in email, but I've misspelt that. When I run that, it's going to try and run that step. It can't find that because I've spelt it incorrectly. I can click fix step, click on the screen. It fixes the step, keeps running it for me. So what we're getting here is very robust automation being created that when I click on I'm done, and also I'll just call out, bear in mind that we have what we call autonomous waits. So we wait for network traffic, which means you don't have to put typically wait times in. When I click on I'm done, what we're actually doing here, we're looking at the DOM level of the application to discover the elements, automatically identify all the selectors, XPath IDs and class names for each of the steps, as well as capturing those screenshots. So now when I run this, which you can do from CI/CD tools, you could hook it into your pipelines. You could run from execution plans to be able to schedule, let's say, running my full regression pack. But then equally here, I could just run this, execute it. We are launching bots from our cloud to run the test and immediately fire up. So you can see this is immediately running. We run on a headless Chrome browser, but we can run on grids to go cross-browser. You can run on different environments. You're getting execution details on a given day, time, who ran this, where it was run, so Virtuoso Chrome, the environment. And then we're getting those full screenshots for every single step here. What we're also doing is we are using machine learning to drive our self-healing, which this enables us to basically say every time you run your test on each run for every step, we are looking at the previous working model. And if we see that there are changes, so this could be a dynamic ID, it could be an XPath change if the elements change location or class names, it could be the label changes through localization, or maybe I'm picking the first option on a list of policies and that is going to change each time because the data in the environment is changing. We're using machine learning algorithms to, with confidence, identify if this is our same element, but something in the selectors or maybe the label has changed, we auto heal that with a very high success rate, which is validated by our customers and also by anybody trialing the platform to basically say, you now no longer need to maintain your test through otherwise flaky changes. This works very well in Salesforce. I like that as an example because it's very dynamic with dynamic IDs, truncated XCasts, missing iframe IDs. This works very well to continue selecting the correct elements, even where there are those sorts of dynamic changes occurring. So we actually see the reduction in the maintenance burden is massive, which of course then enables people to use the speed with the live authoring that's easy to use. to do more in-sprint continuous testing across different applications. So I think then just the only other things to highlight really are then you get full reporting dashboards. So I can look in, so I can basically go through and look at all my tests that have been run. But then equally, I can come in and look at our project activity, which shows me all of basically the jobs, the execution plans that have been run, and the test plans with all of the outputs based on filtering on job ranges, looking at particular test plans or certain statuses to be able to see if there is a failure, as we have here. Again, I can drill in. I can see this is an obvious one. There was a bug that made quite clear, but I could see when it was run, where, who, what browser. I can click in and firstly read through to see, well, it failed almost immediately. It's saying that they couldn't find the target element. I mean, I forced this to, but if I could see that there's clearly the button on screen and it's not working, then I can start looking at our root cause analysis to be able to say, here's the page source, the DOM, at the time the test is running, together with the page network, the page console logs. So if I can see something immediate there, that's great. You know, we've got those insights, and I can be bringing anyone into this through specifying this URL, having email notifications, alerts to the pipeline to bring my engineers in. But then those engineers equally could say, well, I now want to rerun this and debug it. So I can come in, I can basically rerun my test, but put in, it could be a pause point into this. So maybe it fixed, I don't know, on this step here, I could add a pause point. As I start running this through, I get access into the dev tools. So I could go to advanced mode, and I can basically start looking at things like the network or the console. So basically, as I step through my test, I might go one at a time. I can start as an engineer to debug and see, actually, are there issues which cause this to fail? Which, so for instance, here, I've got something on the console. I've live debugging without having to manually go back and play this back or replicate it, you know, so you don't have to now try and reproduce because you're doing it within Virtuoso. So we're finding this ability to go from, you know, the simple means to be able to author very powerful functional integration, data-driven tests across multiple apps, including documentation, running these where we can run tests in parallel and at scale, and then having the self-healing, but also then test reporting with the debugging. This is what we're finding is making this incredibly powerful, particularly, you know, across many industries, but today, as we're talking about within insurance, where we're gaining a good customer base. So hopefully that's been a good demonstration of the platform for you. And, you know, I'm sure Ryan will give you the details of how you can get in touch. With a hint, it's go to our website. But otherwise, Ryan, I think we can go probably to our favorite segment, which is any questions.
Well, just before that happens, I'm going to launch a poll apropos of what James just mentioned, and that is, would you like to be prioritized for a personalized demo? It's yes or no. If you just want to put in there, and then if you do want one, we will prioritize you. While that's going on, I'll let you know about one of the questions that I've got in. I need to sequentially test APIs using and validate using the UI. Is this something you could help with?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan. And we're actually seeing now, we're seeing a trend in testing, which more is starting to be done at the integration layers. But it seems that there's a struggle to combine both the UI and integrations where, yeah, with us, you can build out all your collections of APIs. You can make, for example, your token call, restore that in a response in your testing journey, and then basically map that into your next API call. So in the UI, you can build a sequence of API calls, assert on those, but also then if the final stage is to go into the UI and check the output, then yes, you can absolutely do that with Virtuoso. And we'll be happy to discuss that further with anybody who'd like to see a demonstration of that.
Good. And I've just got one more. Am I able to bring my own grid for cross-browser testing?
Yeah, so we have our own offering, which is by way of a browser stack plan that we have, but equally you can bring your own grids, browser stack, Lambda test at this stage. So yes, you can absolutely bring your own grid to be able to test cross-browser for that. Effectively, we're calling an API. So yeah, we can support those grids.
Excellent. Which, if you would like to have another question, please do it now. Otherwise, it just remains for me to thank everybody for coming. I know that, that there's a lot of competition out there for webinars. We hope that you found it useful, and thank you for being here. Thank you to James Bent for his steadfast and, as usual, not so grandiose work. And that's it from me. Ciao, ciao for now.
Thank you very much, Evan.